Usually when we talk about a country's development, there's this expectation of a perfectly logical sequence.
Oh, absolutely. The classic textbook model.
Right? It's like building a house. You lay the foundation, you put up the walls, and then, you install the roof.
Yeah, the standard economic theory tells us that you generate wealth, you build physical infrastructure, and then almost automatically the people thrive.
Exactly. Society just sort of upgrades. Wealth equals progress. It's clean, it makes sense, but then you step into the real world of modern economic data.
And suddenly that entire blueprint is turned completely upside down.
It really is. We are looking at a developmental landscape today that is, honestly, it's mind-bending. I want you, the listener, to imagine a country right now.
Okay, let's set the scene.
Imagine a country that is the ultimate, undisputed global green champion. I mean, a nation generating virtually 100% of its electricity from renewable sources.
A literal green energy giant. The kind of zero-carbon grid that, well, highly advanced economies in Europe and North America are currently spending trillions of dollars trying to emulate.
Yeah, and often with pretty limited success, right?
Very limited, yeah.
So hold that futuristic, perfectly clean grid in your mind. Take that exact same country and imagine that it simultaneously has a staggering 77.3% learning poverty rate.
Which is just a brutal statistic.
It is. It means that over 3/4 of its primary school graduates cannot understand a basic short text.
It is the absolute definition of a structural disconnect.
Yeah.
I mean, you have extreme infrastructural dominance colliding head-on with a critical human capital deficit.
And that brings us to the subject of today's deep dive. We are looking at Paraguay.
The invisible champion.
Right, nestled right there in the heart of South America. And we are unpacking a massive stack of economic, environmental, and educational data today.
Yeah, we've got the Paraguay Development Report, the latest census data from 2022, several World Bank reports, and a mountain of historical economic indicators.
It's a lot of material. But our mission today is to explore this dual dilemma. So why should you care about this relatively small, landlocked South American nation?
That's the big question.
Because Paraguay represents the ultimate test case for modern development. It fundamentally challenges that standard assumption we just talked about, that if you just fix the physical infrastructure and generate wealth, the human element will just, magically fix itself.
And to really understand what's happening here, and why it matters on a global scale, we have to establish the macro context first.
Let's do it. Where do they stand globally?
Well, based on the 2022 census and World Bank data, Paraguay is classified as an upper middle income country, and it's an IBRD borrower.
Okay, I want to pause right there because IBRD borrower sounds like incredibly dry financial jargon.
It does, yeah.
What does that actually signal to us?
It's actually a crucial distinction. The IBRD, that's the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, they don't just lend to anyone.
Right, they have standards.
Exactly. It means Paraguay has a level of economic stability, an institutional framework, and creditworthiness that really sets it apart from lower income, highly fragile developing nations.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they lend specifically to middle income and creditworthy poorer countries. So Paraguay holds a highly unique economic position in the Latin America and Caribbean region.
So we aren't talking about a struggling, impoverished state in the traditional, stereotypical sense.
Not at all. It has real, quantifiable wealth and massive natural resources.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand this catastrophic education crisis, we really have to look at the economic engine that built this country's modern wealth.
We have to see how the house was built before we look at the cracks in the walls.
Exactly. How did Paraguay actually get its money? Where did this upper middle income status come from?
Well, if you look at the GDP growth timeline, the trajectory is almost dizzying. We're talking about a gross domestic product that sat at a mere $200 million back in 1960.
200 million, okay.
By 2023, that figure had rocketed to roughly $43.1 billion.
Wait, 200 million to 43.1 billion. That is a multiplier that is hard to even conceptualize.
It's massive.
That's not just growth. That's an entirely different universe of wealth.
It is, but the most important part of this data isn't just the final number, it's the shape of the curve.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it wasn't a slow, gentle, predictable incline. The data highlights intense, sometimes even violent volatility.
Like boom and bust cycles.
Exactly. For instance, there was an explosive growth spike in 2013 where the GDP growth rate hit an astonishing 13.5%.
13.5% in a single year?
In 1 year, yeah.
If you're listening to this in an advanced economy, your government is probably popping champagne if they hit 2 or 3%.
Oh, absolutely. A 13% jump is almost unheard of for a stable economy.
How does an entire nation's economy expand by nearly 14% in 12 months? What are the actual mechanics of that?
The mechanics are entirely tied to the land. That 13.5% spike was heavily driven by agricultural supercycles and external commodity conditions.
So farming.
Yes, historically, Paraguay has been an agrarian powerhouse, primarily exporting massive quantities of soybeans and beef.
Okay, so when global commodity prices for soy surge...
And the weather cooperates to produce a bumper crop, yeah, a massive influx of foreign capital just floods into a relatively small economy. The GDP balloons.
But then conversely, I imagine if there's a drought...
Or if global prices tank, the economy takes a massive hit. It's very volatile.
So they are effectively at the mercy of the rain and the global commodities market.
Pretty much.
That doesn't sound like a stable foundation for long-term upper-middle income status.
You're exactly right, and the Paraguayan leadership knows this, which is why the data shows us a fascinating structural transformation of the economy over the last 6 decades.
They're trying to escape the boom and bust.
Exactly. They are actively trying to escape that agricultural volatility. Let's look at the numbers. In 1962, agriculture represented a massive 37% of the entire GDP.
Over a third of the economy. It was the absolute undeniable backbone of the nation.
Right. But fast forward to 2022, and agriculture's share of the GDP has steadily dropped to just 11.6%.
Wait, I need to push back on that for a second. If agriculture shrank from 37% to roughly 11%, are they farming less?
No.
Because you just said they are an agrarian powerhouse exporting massive amounts of soy and beef.
That is a brilliant clarification to make. No, they are not farming less. In absolute terms, their agricultural output has actually grown immensely.
Oh, I see. So it's about the proportions.
Exactly. The rest of the economy has grown so much faster that agriculture's relative slice of the pie has shrunk. The structural weight of the economy has shifted entirely.
So where did all that economic weight go? What took its place?
The service sector. The data shows the service sector has taken over as the dominant economic driver. Back in 1962, it was only about 39.9%, but by 2022, it grew to 44.1% of the economy.
So almost half the economy is now services.
Yes. And if you analyze the foreign trade landscape, it reflects this shift away from purely raw materials.
What are they exporting now besides soy and beef?
Manufacturing exports have recovered and fluctuated, going from 11.4% of exports in 1962 to around 19% in 2022.
Okay, so making actual physical goods is up.
Yeah, but even more telling, information and communication technology, or ICT exports, made up 7.1% of commercial services by 2015.
ICT exports. From a landlocked country historically known for cattle and soybeans.
Yeah.
That is a massive pivot.
Is a deliberate pivot. If we connect this to the bigger picture of development economics, Paraguay is actively trying to move up the value chain.
Right, they don't just want to be the farm anymore.
Exactly. They are looking at their massive water and power resources and trying to find a higher value position in regional and global trade.
Shifting from just farming the land to providing modern, diversified services, maybe advanced manufacturing and tech infrastructure.
That's the goal.
It makes me think of an analogy. Paraguay's economic timeline is almost like a teenager experiencing a massive, somewhat erratic growth spurt.
Oh, I like that. How so?
You know, they are getting taller and stronger incredibly fast, like that 13.5% growth year. But because the growth is so rapid, they are a bit uncoordinated.
Right.
The bones are growing faster than the muscles can keep up. They have all this new size and strength, but they haven't quite figured out how to use it gracefully yet.
That's a great way to look at it. The sheer volume of wealth has expanded faster than the underlying structural refinement of the economy.
They are trying to build the coordination of a mature adult economy while still dealing with the growing pains.
Yes, exactly.
But wait, this brings up a really critical question, and it's one I want you, the listener, to keep in the back of your mind for the rest of this deep dive.
It's the elephant in the room.
Right. If the country is shifting heavily away from just raw agriculture and moving into services, manufacturing, and even ICT export.
Doesn't that inherently require a highly educated, tech-savvy workforce?
Exactly. You can't run a booming IT sector or a complex manufacturing plant with a machete and a tractor. You need engineers, you need coders, you need managers.
You've hit the exact friction point. And that is the looming shadow over this entire economic miracle, which we will definitely dissect.
The tension between their high-tech economic ambitions and their baseline workforce capabilities.
It's the defining conflict of Paraguay's future.
But before we get into the workforce and that human element, we need to talk about the physical power driving this teenager's growth spurt.
The energy grid.
Because the most glaring feature of this economic growth is how it's powered. Paraguay's unique geography turned it into an absolute energy titan.
We really did.
But this perfectly clean image hides a severe, almost tragic environmental toll.
It really is one of the most fascinating environmental paradoxes on the planet today. Let's look at the green triumph first.
Okay, hit me with the numbers.
The data shows Paraguay's renewable electricity output consistently hovers near 100%.
Near 100%.
Yeah. In 2016, for example, the official data clocked it at an incredible 99.99%.
99.99%. That's not just a passing grade. That is essentially a rounding error away from absolute perfection.
It's unmatched globally.
When you think about the billions being spent globally just to reach 40 or 50% renewables, that number is staggering. How exactly did they achieve that?
It comes down to geography and massive visionary engineering.
Hydroelectric, right.
Largely, yes. It's thanks to colossal hydroelectric projects, primarily the Itaipu Dam, which they share with Brazil.
I've seen pictures of that dam. It's massive.
To give you an idea of the mechanics here, this dam is so huge, so efficient at harnessing the flow of the Paraná River, that it generates vastly more clean electricity than the entire population of Paraguay can even consume.
See, they have an overwhelming surplus of green energy.
Exactly. When you compare this to fossil fuel-dependent economies across the globe, Paraguay's carbon intensity regarding electricity is spectacularly low.
Which gives them a massive first-mover advantage in the global energy transition.
Huge advantage. They don't have to spend the next 30 years and hundreds of billions of dollars trying to wean their national grid off coal and natural gas.
They are already at the finish line.
Are already there.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because you look at that 99.99% clean electricity and you think, Paraguay is an absolute ecological utopia. It's the model for the 21st century.
Right. On paper, it looks flawless.
But then you turn the page in the development report and you see the ecological shadow. We have to contrast this immaculate, clean grid with the devastating loss of their forest dividend.
And the numbers here are incredibly sobering.
Walk us through it.
The World Bank data tracks this meticulously. In 1990, forest cover accounted for 64.3% of Paraguay's total land area.
So almost two-thirds of the country was forest.
It was a lush, heavily forested nation. But by 2021, that number had plummeted to just 30.5%.
Wait, I want to make sure the listener really absorbed that. That is more than half of their entire national forests.
Yeah.
Gone. Erased. In just 30 years.
Gone. And we can actually quantify the financial and ecological cost of this loss.
How do you even put a price tag on that?
The data traps something called net forest depletion, which calculates the monetary value of replacing the depleted natural capital.
Okay.
For Paraguay, this reached a peak value of $503 million in a single year, back in 2014.
$500 million of natural capital up in smoke in 1 year. But why? What are the actual mechanics of this deforestation? Are they just cutting it down for timber?
Timber is a factor, sure, but it's not the primary driver. The mechanics of this deforestation are directly tied to that massive economic growth we talked about earlier.
The
boom. Remember that 13.5% GDP spike in 2013?
Yeah, driven by agriculture.
That wealth didn't come out of thin air. It came at the direct expense of the country's ecological dividend.
So they were clearing land.
Aggressively. They were clearing virgin forest land to make way for expansive cattle ranching and massive industrial-scale soybean plantations.
Oh, man. So it's a direct trade-off.
Exactly. So you have this bizarre, almost contradictory reality. It's a paradox of absolutely clean energy combined with incredibly dirty land use.
It's like installing top-of-the-line, perfectly efficient solar panels on the roof of your house, but to pay for them, you are simultaneously setting fire to your own backyard to clear space for a cash crop garden.
That's a perfect visual.
You're generating clean power, but you're burning down your own ecosystem to do it.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
If you are a developing nation, isn't that just the price of admission? I mean, didn't Europe and North America cut down all their forests to industrialize hundreds of years ago?
That is the exact argument often used by developing nations, and historically, it's accurate. They did.
So why is it different for Paraguay now? However, the macroeconomic rules have changed in the 21st century. The pressure for sustainable development is mounting globally.
Right, the ESG requirements.
Exactly. Foreign investors, especially the high-tech, high-value companies Paraguay wants to attract, are no longer just looking at the electricity source.
You're looking at the whole picture.
They are looking at full supply chain sustainability.
So if a global tech giant wants to build a data center there, they love the hydropower, but their shareholders will revolt if the facility is built on freshly clear-cut Amazonian-adjacent forests.
Precisely. It becomes a tremendous branding and existential risk.
I see.
Paraguay is reaching a critical tipping point. The old model of expansionary agriculture, where you grow the economy simply by cutting down more trees to plant more soy,
Oh.
is a dead end.
So what's the alternative? How do they keep growing?
They must transition to precision-intensive agriculture,
Meaning what? Exactly.
meaning you increase yields on the land you already have cleared. You use advanced technology, better soil management, data analytics, rather than just bulldozing more forest.
Okay, so let's summarize where we are so far. We have a booming, highly volatile economy powered by perfect green electricity, but paid for, in part, by burning through half of their national forests.
That's the baseline, yes.
That is a lot of wealth generation, but also a lot of sacrifice. So the obvious question is, with all this money from agriculture and hydroelectric dams pouring into the country over the last 20 years, where did the money actually go?
Right, who actually benefited?
Did it just sit in the offshore bank accounts of a few massive landowners and politicians? Because you see that a lot.
If you look at the historical precedent of many resource-rich developing nations, that is exactly what you would expect. It's often called the resource curse.
Right, where the natural wealth actually makes the country worse off institutionally.
Exactly. But this is where Paraguay's data tells a remarkably positive, almost counterintuitive story.
Really?
The money didn't just vanish into an oligarchy. What we see in the data is a legitimate social miracle.
A miracle. That's a strong word for an economist to use. Walk me through the mechanics of that. How do we know the money actually reached the people?
Let's look at the hard metrics of poverty reduction.
Okay.
In 2002, a staggering 57.7% of the population lived below the national poverty line.
Almost 60%.
Think about that. More than half the country was struggling for basic survival.
Wow.
But by 2022, that number plummeted to 22.7%.
Down to 22.7.
That is a drop of over 35 percentage points.
35% of an entire nation lifted out of poverty in 20 years. If you're listening to this, try to visualize that.
It's a massive shift.
Imagine walking down a street where 6 out of 10 people are in poverty, and 2 decades later, it's only 2 out of 10. You don't see that kind of rapid societal transformation very often outside of, well, absolute global outliers.
You really don't. It radically rewrites the social fabric. And it wasn't just the overall poverty rate, it was the distribution of that wealth.
How so?
We measure this using the Gini coefficient.
Okay, I admit, I always get a little hazy on the Gini coefficient. Can you break down exactly how that works so we truly grasp the magnitude of what Paraguay did here?
Absolutely. The Gini coefficient is the standard global metric for measuring economic inequality.
Right.
Imagine a scale from 0 to 100. A score of 0 means perfect equality.
Yeah.
Everyone in the country has the exact same amount of money.
Which doesn't exist anywhere.
Right. And a score of 100 means absolute inequality. One single person has all the money, and everyone else has 0.
Also impossible, hopefully.
Exactly. Now, in 2002, Paraguay's Gini coefficient was 57.3,
Which is high.
which indicates extreme, deeply entrenched inequality. But by 2022, they drove that number down to 44.2.
Okay, 44.2 is still not perfect equality, obviously, but a drop from 57 to 44 is a massive shift toward the middle.
The trend line is fantastic.
It means the wealth didn't just pool at the very top, it actually flattened out across a newly emerging middle class.
Precisely. And if we want to look at the most vital, undeniable indicator of this wealth distribution, we look at public health.
Because health outcomes are directly tied to wealth.
Always. The economic dividends from the soy and the dams were actively converted into life-saving realities. The data on under-5 mortality is the best example.
What are the numbers there?
Back in 1960, the under-5 mortality rate was over 100 deaths per 1,000 live births.
1 in 10 kids, that's tragic.
It was. But by 2022, that number plummeted to just 17.6 per 1,000.
From over 100 down to 17.
Yes. Furthermore, maternal care improved drastically. By recent data, 90.7% of pregnant women in Paraguay now receive proper prenatal care.
Wow. I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Go for it.
Is this a sign of sustainable structural wealth? Or is this just the inevitable mathematical result of a government taking billions of dollars in dam revenue and dumping it into basic cash handouts and simple rural clinics?
That's a valid question.
Like, are they actually building a self-sustaining society or just subsidizing survival?
It's a very fair critique, and honestly, it's a bit of both. But we cannot understate the achievement. Eradicating extreme poverty in a booming agricultural economy often does come down to direct cash transfers, building basic sanitation infrastructure, and ensuring caloric availability.
Right, the basics.
You can legally mandate prenatal care and use dam revenue to fund the clinics. It is a textbook success story of converting macroeconomic gains into tangible social safety nets.
So the physical hardware of the citizenry, their health, their basic survival, their physical development has been fundamentally secured compared to previous generations.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but here is where the entire narrative takes a dark, incredibly frustrating turn.
It really does.
Because I'm looking at this logical sequence we talked about at the very beginning. If the children are surviving and the population is vastly richer and the population is significantly healthier, shouldn't the next logical step be a thriving intellectual generation?
That is what you would expect.
If you have healthy kids who aren't living in extreme poverty, their brains are developing normally, they should be dominating the classroom, right? What is going wrong in the classrooms in Paraguay?
This brings us to the shocking heart of this deep dive.
The core dilemma.
The physical bodies of the citizens are healthier, yes. They are surviving. But their minds, their cognitive potential, are being constrained by a catastrophic systemic failure in the education sector.
It's what our research notes call the illusion of education. Let's look at the data because at first glance, if you don't read the fine print, it actually looks like a massive success.
That's the trap. On paper, the quantity of education looks like a developed nation.
They have the numbers.
The government can point to these statistics and declare victory. Youth literacy is consistently reported at above 98%.
90%.
And primary net enrollment, meaning the sheer number of kids of the correct age who are registered and physically attending school, reached a high of 95.5% back in 2004 and has remained robust.
So the kids are in the building, the classrooms are full, they are sitting in the seats.
They are on the seats. But that is merely the hardware of education. The quality of what happens while they are sitting in those seats is a full-blown crisis.
Let's get into the specifics of that crisis.
This introduces a very specific concept tracked by the World Bank called learning poverty. And Paraguay's total learning poverty rate is a devastating 77.3%.
77.3%. I really want to stop here and make sure you, the listener, understand exactly what that metric means.
It's crucial.
Because when I first read that, I thought it had to be a typo. How can you have 98% literacy, but 77% learning poverty?
It's all about the definition of the metrics.
Okay, break it down.
The learning poverty rate specifically measures the percentage of children who, by the end of primary school, which is around age 10, cannot read and understand a simple basic short story.
Just a basic story.
Yes. In Paraguay, 74.2% of primary school students graduate without meeting this minimum reading proficiency standard.
3 out of 4 10-year-olds. They spend years sitting in a classroom. They are counted as enrolled. They are part of that 98% youth literacy statistic. Wait, how are they counted as literate if they can't read a short story?
Because literacy in these broad national surveys often just measures the ability to decode letters.
To code?
Yeah, a child might be able to sound out the letters of their name or read a single word off a chalkboard.
What?
That checks the box for literacy.
Oh, wow.
But decoding is not comprehending. Comprehension means reading a paragraph about a dog finding a bone and being able to answer the question, what did the dog find?
And 3/4 of them can't do that, so they possess almost zero actual reading comprehension. That is horrifying.
It is. What's fascinating here is the stark, undeniable difference between schooling and learning.
Right.
Building physical schools, buying desks, pouring concrete, and legally enforcing attendance is relatively easy.
It's just logistics.
It's a logistical challenge that can be solved with money from a hydroelectric dam. But training effective teachers, developing rigorous pedagogical curricula, and actually building cognitive pathways inside a child's brain, that is incredibly hard.
It takes more than just cash.
It requires institutional depth. And Paraguay's system is failing at it.
I look at this and I picture building a massive state-of-the-art smartphone factory.
Oh, here we go.
You've got the conveyor belts, the robotic arms, the pristine glass, the advanced microchips. You are churning out millions of beautifully assembled devices. That's the 95% enrollment rate.
The kids are moving through the system.
Exactly. But at the very end of the line, right before they ship, you realize someone forgot to install the operating systems on the phones.
Wow.
The physical hardware is completely there. It looks exactly like a phone, but the functionality is fundamentally broken. It can't process anything. You tap the screen and nothing happens.
That is a chillingly accurate analogy. You have an entire generation of children who have the physical capacity to participate in a modern economy, but they haven't been given the cognitive operating system to do so.
And what's the real-world cost of that?
The economic cost of missing that operating system is brutally quantified by another metric,
Which one?
the Human Capital Index, or HCI.
Okay, let's break down the HCI.
Paraguay's total HCI currently sits at roughly 0.51 to 0.53 out of a perfect score of 1.
So what does a 0.53 actually mean for a human being in the real world? How does that translate to their actual life?
It's a predictive metric. It means that a child born in Paraguay today, even after receiving the full current standard of education and healthcare that the country offers, will only be 53% as productive in the workforce as they could be under ideal conditions.
Wow, they are losing 47% of their lifelong economic potential.
Almost half.
Almost half of their human capacity is just evaporating simply because the system fails to educate them properly in those first 10 years of life.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the friction point we discussed earlier.
The big question.
How does a country with the immense resources to build global-scale hydroelectric dams, a country that's successfully slashed its national poverty rate by 35 points in 20 years, fail so profoundly at teaching a 10-year-old to comprehend a basic short story?
Right. It seems like it should be a much easier problem to solve than eradicating extreme poverty.
You would think so.
You figured out how to negotiate a massive international dam treaty with Brazil, but you can't figure out a third-grade reading curriculum. Why?
Because it requires a completely different type of institutional capacity. Eradicating extreme poverty in a booming agricultural economy, as we discussed, often comes down to direct resource distribution.
You just give them the resources.
You can distribute wealth. You could distribute vaccines. You cannot simply distribute reading comprehension.
That's a great point.
It requires an institutional depth, a culture of accountability, teacher evaluation systems, and pedagogical expertise that Paraguay simply hasn't developed yet.
It's structural.
And this learning deficit is the ultimate ceiling on Paraguay's future. It acts as an anchor,
Holding them back.
preventing the country from transitioning from a factor-driven economy, which relies on cheap land, cheap water, and raw commodities, to an innovation-driven economy.
Which brings us crashing right into Paraguay's ambitions for the future. We talked about how they desperately want to leverage that 100% green energy grid and attract modern, high-tech foreign investment.
Yes, the services and ICT pivot.
They want the service sector and ICT to take over, but to do that, you need strong institutions, and from the data, it looks like the institutional framework is currently a major, perhaps insurmountable roadblock.
It is the bottleneck that chokes off the potential of both their green energy and their people. We have to look at how businesses actually operate in this environment.
What did the business metrics look like?
Well, if we look at the data on regulatory quality, the estimated score for Paraguay has long been stuck in negative territory, ranging from negative 0.49 to negative 0.0.
Okay, wait. Negative regulatory quality. I admit I don't fully understand how a country gets a negative score.
It's an index scale.
But what does a negative score actually feel like for a business trying to operate there? That doesn't exactly scream, safe place to invest $1 billion.
A negative score on these global indices essentially means the regulatory environment actively hinders rather than facilitates private sector development.
So the government is in the way.
It means the rules are unpredictable. To understand how this works mechanically, we should look deeper into the Be Ready Index, which measures the business and investment environment.
Okay, let's hear it.
We see a fascinating, very revealing split in their scores. The operational efficiency for simply locating a business in Paraguay is quite high, scoring an 81.14.
Meaning it's physically easy to acquire a piece of land, plug your facility into that massive green grid, and set up shop. The government makes it easy for you to arrive.
Right. The welcome mat is out. But then once you are there, you have to actually run your business and pay your taxes.
And what happens then?
When you look at the quality of tax regulations, the score plummets to a remarkably low 34.25.
An 81 for getting there and a 34 for paying taxes, that is a massive discrepancy. What is the mechanism behind that 34 score? Are taxes just incredibly high?
It's rarely about the rate of the tax, it's about the opacity of the system.
Opacity, so it's confusing.
A score of 34 implies that the rules are opaque, enforcement is inconsistent, and compliance is a massive bureaucratic headache.
Got it.
You might need to hire a dozen local accountants just to figure out what you owe, and even then, an auditor might arbitrarily decide you owe something else. The institutional environment is stuck in a very messy reform phase.
Okay, so let's synthesize this. I want you to put yourself in a specific scenario. Imagine you are the CEO of a major foreign tech company or an advanced manufacturing firm.
Okay, I'm the CEO.
You're sitting in a boardroom in Silicon Valley or Berlin. You look at a map of South America, you see Paraguay, and you start drooling over the cheap 100% renewable energy.
Because it's an absolute ESG dream.
Right. You can tell your shareholders your entire supply chain is powered by water.
The initial attraction is incredibly strong.
But then you do your due diligence. You look past the dam, you see the opaque tax regulations, you see the negative institutional efficiency.
You see the bureaucracy.
You realize you can't accurately forecast your 5-year tax liability because the rules change depending on who you talk to.
Which is terrifying for a CEO.
But maybe you can stomach that risk. Maybe the power is cheap enough. But then comes the absolute deal breaker. You realize that 3/4 of the local workforce might lack basic text comprehension.
And that is where the boardroom pitch dies.
Right. You can't hire people to run complex robotic machinery or manage IT networking systems or even follow stringent safety protocols if they can't effectively read the manual.
You really can't.
You can't run a knowledge economy with a workforce suffering from a 77% learning poverty rate.
Exactly. The hesitation is immediate and profound. A foreign tech giant might come in and set up a massive server farm because a server farm only requires 10 highly paid expats to run it, and they just want the cheap electricity.
Sure, just plug the servers in and leave.
But they won't build an advanced manufacturing facility or a regional headquarters that employs thousands of locals. The friction is simply too high. The human capital isn't there.
It's like Paraguay is a sports car with a massive futuristic engine. That's the 100% green energy grid. It has unlimited power.
I love these analogies.
But it has terrible misaligned steering, which are the opaque regulations, and it has 4 completely flat tires, which is the massive human capital deficit.
Right.
You can sit in the driver's seat and rev that futuristic engine all you want. You can make a lot of noise, but you aren't going to win the race. Honestly, you can't even get out of the pit lane.
That's the dual dilemma perfectly encapsulated. It is the middle-income trap in its purest form. You cannot power a 21st century economy purely on voltage. You have to power it on intellect.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Paraguay Development Report, let's synthesize the 3 core pillars we've discussed today. Because it's a wildly complex, contradictory picture.
It is. Let's break it down. First, we have the solid foundation.
The wealth.
Despite the challenges, Paraguay has achieved incredibly successful poverty reduction and possesses an absolute global advantage in green electricity.
Which is massive.
This provides them with a financial and infrastructural baseline that most developing nations would absolutely kill for. The wealth is real, and it has improved lives.
Second, we have the urgent environmental debt. The deforestation we talked about, losing half their forests in 30 years, requires an immediate pivot.
They can't keep clearing land.
They have to transition from expansionary farming, where they just burn more land to grow the economy, to precise, sustainable agriculture. They have to protect what's left of their ecological dividend if they want to market themselves globally.
Absolutely. And third, the fatal flaw, learning poverty.
The biggest hurdle.
It is the Achilles heel of their long-term competitiveness.
Yeah.
Having a 77.3% learning poverty rate amidst all this upper middle income wealth is a systemic failure that must be addressed.
So, what is the actionable vision here? What is the endpoint of the story for Paraguay? Imagine a visual for a second.
Okay.
Imagine a young Paraguayan student sitting at a desk learning to code or analyze data under a solar panel powered by the Itaipu Dam. The ultimate goal for this country has to be to sync that wisdom with the green energy.
The macroeconomic prescription is clear. Paraguay must take the vast financial surplus generated by its agricultural exports and its hydroelectric power, and it must Aggressively, unapologetically reinvest it into a radical overhaul of educational quality.
Not just building more schools.
Exactly. Not just schools, but training better teachers and reforming the curriculum. They have what economists call a demographic dividend, a large population of young people.
Right.
But a demographic dividend is utterly useless if it doesn't become a talent dividend. They need a highly skilled workforce to match their highly advanced power grid.
It's all about upgrading the human software to run the environmental hardware. And that leaves me with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
We live in an era right now where massive tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, are desperately scouring the globe, searching for clean, uninterrupted energy to power their massive AI data centers.
The energy demand for AI is insane.
The compute power required for the future is staggering. Paraguay is sitting on an absolute goldmine of exactly what the 21st century needs: clean, endless electricity.
They have the fuel.
But what if the country that eventually wins the AI revolution isn't the one that designs the best microchip? What if the real winner is the country that solves the basic human riddle?
Which is education.
Figuring out how to eradicate learning poverty so its citizens can actually build, manage, and operate the technology of tomorrow. Could this small, landlocked South American nation, currently struggling to teach its 10-year-olds how to read a short story, eventually figure out the formula and write the blueprint for the 22nd century?
It raises an incredibly important question about where true national value lies. If they can fix the muddy waters of their institutional and educational landscape, to bring it back to where we started, they have all the physical tools to do it.
The power is literally there. The wealth is there.
The only thing missing is the human connection.
Broken or not broken, it's time for Paraguay to fix the operating system. Until next time, keep diving deep.